Uh, all right. Okay, so we just the Torah portion, these two Torah portions are largely or overwhelmingly about this idea of tzarat, this supernatural affliction, which would hit bodies, clothing, and even domiciles. And we're about to finish that part, the close out the tzarat element of this, and just come to the tail end of the parsha, which goes into a different topic. But as we didn't finish, we're on page 111. This is the tail end. Today we'll be finishing the tzarat part of this, although the rest of it isn't all that much more interesting. But it's about the tzarat part will finish. We had already gone into the earlier Torah portion of Tazria. We had gone through the laws, the diagnosis, and so on of when tzarat afflicts the body, and a bit about the clothing, and then now we got into a house, when it afflicts a house. And one of the things it says is that, and we read last week, the person sees something in the house, and he says to the Kohen, "Kenega near libebayit." It's something looking like a tzarat affliction has been shown to me or appears to me in my house. So, and just to, because as we're going through, we want to be able to just pick up little pieces of this. Yeah, the language is odd because he went to the Kohen and said, I see something like this in my house. It's a little bit roundabout language. It appears to me, or has appeared to me, or has been shown to me in my house. And one of the greats of Tzvat, the Kabbalists of Tzvat from the 16th century, who were together with Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, that made Tzvat so famous, Rabbi Moshe Alshich, he writes about this, that one of the Tzarat lessons is that the Torah wants us to have emblazoned in our minds and hearts that God is part of everything in the world. And that when we see things, when things go on, things beyond our control, we should see in them messages from God. And therefore, when the person sees tzarat, it's not just, oh my gosh, this is an affliction. Yesterday it was a regular dermatology affliction. I had to go to the dermatologist and put on this lotion. Now it's a different affliction. I go to the Kohen and I go through the spiritual hoops to get rid of it. There's a message from God. And the language itself implies that this is something that has been shown to me. Of course, it's because of behaviors, and specifically with the house, it wasn't so much lashon hara, but it was more about they're all like antisocial behaviors, but this was more about not sharing, not welcoming people into a home, or not feeling very possessive about one's possessions, which legally are one's possessions, but not feeling the need to share also and to have the community benefit from our possessions, which was usually the essential thing of the tzarat. The way we saw others, the way if we saw with a stinginess, or saw a desire to help. So the person would say, this has been shown to me. And we said that would be analyzed. And then there was once it was ready to be declared, it was declared pure, there was an offering to be brought at the end. That's what we're up to on page 50, on page 111 at the top, verse 50. We'll just go through the verses. It says, he must slaughter one fowl such that its blood drip into an earthenware vessel and onto spring water that has been placed in the vessel. He must take the bundle comprising the cedar stick, the hyssop, the strip of scarlet wool, plus the live fowl, and dip them into the blood of the slaughtered fowl into the spring water. He must then sprinkle some of the solution of blood and spring water adhering to the bundle and fowl toward the house 7 times. He must thus purify the house using the blood of the fowl, the spring water, the live fowl, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the strip of scarlet wool. He must then send away the live fowl outside the city into the open field. It will thus affect atonement for the house will be purified from the foul. And finally, the Torah concludes, all this is the law for every lesion of tzarat, or what we call the netek, for tzarat of garments and houses, for a wool white spot, for an egg membrane white. If you remember, at the very beginning when it was introduced, we spoke about these different shades, a lime white spot, and for snow white spot, by which the priest is required to render decisions regarding on which day is in the process of the sufferer's diagnosis or purification process he can be pronounced defiled, on which day he can be pronounced rid of this defile. This is the law of Torah. So that's how the Torah ends the law of Torah. And before we go forward to this final subject of this Torah portion, just to point out one of our medieval commentators, great medieval commentators, known as Rabbi Ben Bachai or Bachia Ben Osher, and he's one of the classic commentaries. And he notes in something that I think we've mentioned before, that in the process of how things would happen, first it would happen on the house. If the person didn't get the hint and get their life together, it hit the clothing, and then finally afflicted the body. But here in the Torah, it presents it the other way. First, we speak about the body, then we speak about the clothing, and then finally it speaks about the house. And Rabbi Bachia or Bachaya, depending on how people pronounce it, he says that if you think about it, it says from his perspective, the Torah, which is a Torah it's called Drachei Dachinon. It's ways of pleasantness. There are rules and there are consequences, but ultimately Torah is a document of love, a document of peace, a document of connectedness for us all. And here we're talking about something which is, tzarat. It's not a pleasant thing. So it basically says the Torah has two ways of being able to present it. You can present it getting successively more severe and more scary. First, it's on the house. Then it comes even closer, come to your clothing. And ultimately, if you don't behave, it's going to come to your body. So that's more scary. And the Torah wants, Yolanda, I see you have a question. I'm just going to answer, just finish this thought, and we'll go through it in a second. So the Torah wanted to present it in a way where up front, we see it in its most disturbing manifestation, the body. So, and once you shoot, your worst bullet, they say, but it could also happen in a milder form, or even in milder form, just to lead us more, so that when we're moving forward in the topic, we're breathing easier successively, not having our stomach tighten more successively. Yes, Yolanda.
At number 51, at the end is toward the house 7 times to sprinkle the solution.
Yeah.
What is the significance of 7 within Judaism?
7 in Judaism, it's a great question, because there definitely is a significance of 7 in Judaism. 7 is seen as is really the fabric of life as we know it in this world. 7 can be 7 different directions: front, back, right, left, up, down, and then there's a point in the middle. So as though you're drawing lines that brings them all together. So similarly, we have 6 days of the week, which are the 6 different directions, and then the 7th Shabbat brings it all together. So it's really the idea of 7. Just so we have the 7. When we go through a week, it's all the different variables. Monday is different than Tuesday, is different than Wednesday, different than Thursday. Doesn't mean you had a different breakfast or a different lunch. It means there are different days, a different energy, a different rhythm, and life has different rhythms. So the 7, really the 6 in a way, symbolizes the potential disjointedness and the different variables of how we go through life. Shabbat represents how we can bring it all together, and 8, which we have in the Bris, we have in Hanukkah, represents something beyond the structure of time and space as we know it, or life.
Thank you.
Sure. And Debbie, you had a question.
Yes. Hold on. So you made the point that Sarat was kind of, you made in the past, a gift, and that it allows us to see God,
Right.
kind of a pretty direct message. So I was thinking, like, gosh, if I lived at that stage, it would be nice to have a direct message, like, let's prove that I have a connection, whatever. Is there a positive equivalent, or is it just a wonderful daily life is the message? That if someone wanted to say, I'd like to kind of see a direct message, so maybe I'll gossip. I don't know. So,
I
mean, not nowadays, but
I get it. I think that one of the elements we've been living with for the past few thousand years is that there isn't a clear action and consequence and response. So it's easier for us to see that to feel that there's no responsibility. There's no what I do is what I do, and it's not really, ultimately not responsible to anyone. In the days of old, it was much more frontal, where we knew that wasn't the case. So I don't know if there's things of testing that, but I think that it was more, there was more opportunities. Like this morning, Malky forwarded me a little video from Israel, a guy who I think he's observant, but an Israeli guy who couldn't have children for 21 years, and tried all the things he could medically and alternative medicine, and their rabbi in Israel suggested that he build a mikveh, because that relates to the idea of the infertility and family life. And you see him, he's like crying, he's choking up as he's speaking, that he's looking at his baby. He says it was 9 months from when we dedicated the mikveh, and I was tearing up, like I was crying. So okay, how you see action reaction. It's if you see those things, it changes the perspective on life. We don't usually see that, and really you can't bank on it, because life doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, in the shallow world in which we live. So here it was seen as a tremendous gift if we could see action reaction, because first of all, we knew our problems. We didn't have the potential to just go forward and not see them, and to be able to see the response. So you're asking, do it to see the response. I mean, there were enough positive things where you could see the response, but it's an important point where we live in we call the darkness of the exile. Well, we call it the darkness because you can't see. I can see you, I can see light, but I can't see the real rhythm of what's going on in the universe.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so we don't have the physical manifestation. So is part, like, you shouldn't take other people's inventory, but is there any obligation, being that we don't have the physical manifestation, to say something to people who maybe are whatever, slandering, gossiping? Is there any obligation?
Yes. So in a couple of Torah portions from here, we're going to have we read it last week, I guess. Yeah, we read it last week, this past Shabbos. There's a Torah portion which is known as Kedoshim, and there's a smattering. That'll be a very interesting Torah portion for us to go through, and there are a lot of very ethical and interpersonal guidances there. One of them is that we have a responsibility to offer constructive criticism, because offering constructive criticism, it's, I guess, similar to what Debbie was just talking about, or what Debbie and I were just talking about. Constructive criticism is constructive because it allows a person to recognize where they have a flaw and they're not noticing it. God used to give that constructive criticism through tzarat. So now we're missing it. But we should care enough about each other to help each other understand, not to say, and we wouldn't say it to someone in a put down way or in an angry way or in a resentful way. But if we care about each other, we're going to let each other know where we're misstepping. If someone you care about and know about walks by you, or you see them and they walk by you in the hallway and they have their, their breakfast on their lip or a stain on their upper shirt, you might call it out, their attention to it, because they don't know about it and they don't want to be seen that way. Now, it may be awkward, maybe to say it to a stranger, but actually it's caring to say it to a stranger, also because you're helping someone you don't know. So calling out a deficiency on and having scrambled eggs on their chin, that is a little awkward, but I think we all understand it's a favor. Well, it's calling out and saying, by the way, what you did was called, it's called slander, or called, it's gossip in Torah law, and it's really not good for anyone, and I don't want anyone to do it to you, and I don't want to, and it's good, so find a nice way to say it's a counterproductive and really self-destructive way of living. Yes, there's a mitzvah to do it in a nice way, but there's a mitzvah to call to attention. All right. So now we're going to go forward with defilement contracted by males via abnormal discharges. Okay. So before we get into that, 111, this is a little bit more of a sensitive topic, in the sense that it's not stuff we talk about in this class as too much, but it is part of life, and it is part of Torah. In Torah thinking, what we'll call marital intimacy, even though I know it doesn't always take place in a marital context, but let's call it marital intimacy, is a very, very, a profoundly important part of life. It's an important part of life because it's part of the glue, the bond, which brings two people together, and the idea of the union in a marriage is considered very sacred in Torah thought, and really emblematic of our relationship with God. And it really strikes deep within the human psyche. It's the idea of the feelings that it calls out are very, very core feelings, and that's why the subject sells in Hollywood and billboards and all that, and why it's so central, because it is a very profoundly resonant part of life. Certainly on the male end, to some extent on the female end, but on the male end, it's seen as being profound, very connected with a deep sense of gratification. And that gratification is the way God designed us. The thing is that the gratification is you really can't separate it from self. It feels good. So the Torah tells us that it's okay if something feels good, but you want to try to direct it into helping someone else feel good, or to be able to create a deeper bond between two people. So it feels good is a wonderful byproduct, but the goal isn't, I want to feel good. So the idea in a marital intimacy is two people trying to make each other feel good, not two people each trying to make themselves feel good, using the other as a tool, which is a very important distinction. The feeling good part is built in, and therefore, more so in the male end, there is this idea of where, even though it's not necessarily biblical, there's this idea that we're after marital intimacy, the advice, that's not a law, the advice is to actually go to the mikveh. So it's not enforced anymore, but it was more a firmer practice than times of the Talmud. Didn't do anything wrong, but it's to I guess to rinse oneself of the self-interest that really is going to find its way in there. So that's as far as what they're going to call here a seminal discharge. Torah talks here about something that really is not relevant in today's law, something that's called, that we would call an abnormal seminal discharge. It looks, it's in a way, it's similar to a seminal discharge, but it's not either. First of all, sometimes it's not voluntary, or even if it is, there's something, it's not the normal way of discharge. And that the Hebrew word for that is a zov. There is such a thing for a woman as zava too, but right now we're talking about a zov. A zov means that zov in Hebrew means to flow, and this it's about what we call generally, I guess, a seminal flow. I think it'll become pretty much understood and apparent from the language of the verses. So let's start with the verses first, and then we're going to get into the Hasidic insights, which Hasidic insights would be much more for us to deal with practically for our lives. The verses, you will see what the Torah tells us. Chapter 15, verse 1. God spoke to Moses, instructing him to convey his words to Aaron, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, following are the laws governing ritual defilement from discharges originating in the reproductive organs." So the reproductive organs are obviously they're essential, both male and female. It's not only about their reproductiveness; they are reproductive organs, but they have a centrality to us, even if they don't happen to be reproducing right now. And if you think about it, also, and we'll get into this a little bit, what happened with Adam and Eve? They were without any clothes at all, and it seemed to work. And then after they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and the knowledge that they got wasn't good knowledge, but it was a way of being able to connect with selfishness and within the world. It's saying, well, not only what something is created for, its purpose, but what it does for me. And the language we may use it to objectify something. So all of a sudden, after they ate, they knew they were naked. They knew they weren't imbeciles before they ate. But the nakedness didn't strike anything. That they had body parts for certain reasons, and everything was fine. As soon as they ate, the objectification kicked in, and that's when it says then they covered themselves. So here, there is that element here within related to not only the reproductive act, the reproductive organs. If any man has a discharge of a specific type of non-seminal fluid from the orifice of his reproductive organ, this fluid being similar in consistency to the liquid that exudes from barley dough. I've never seen barley dough, but this is what the Talmud says. It's similar to that look, and similar in color. It means similar to that consistency, and similar in color to the white of an egg that it was incubated so long that it will no longer hatch. So it doesn't look like normal seminal fluid. His discharge is itself ritually defiled and renders anyone who touches it ritually defiled. So that becomes defiled. But again, we don't have this today. We don't have a lot of the defilement laws because we don't have a temple, we don't have sacred foods, and so on. But the very idea of a zov doesn't exist today. And although it's possible that this is considered something wrong, something unhealthy going on within the person, but the idea, probably a translation or a manifestation of something going wrong spiritually within the person, and the way it expresses itself is with this discharge, and the discharge itself was a source of impurity. If someone touched it, they could not partake in holy matters. They had to go. They have to purify themselves. Let's go further with the verses, and then we'll get into the insights. Let's go to 112. In addition, the man experiencing the discharge will also become ritually defiled. This is how he will contract ritual defilement due to his discharge. Either if his reproductive organ runs freely with his discharge, or his reproductive organ is plugged up by his discharge because the discharge is somewhat more viscous. The law pertaining to a man who's only one discharge will be given below. If a man has two or more discrete discharges, his defilement is sufficient to render him ritually impure to the following degree. Any object intended for reclining upon which the man with discharged lies will thereby become defiled, and any object intended for sitting upon which he sits will thereby become defiled. This is the nature of the defilement that these objects acquire through contact with the man with discharge. It was mentioned previously that only food and drink contract ritual defilement indirectly. People and implements do not. It has to be only if it's direct contact. Exception to this is when the medium of transmission is an object upon which a man suffering from a discharge has reclined himself, and they're putting weight on something. It's a support for them. Then it conveys the impurity, and such objects transmit ritual defilement even to people and implements, including garments, as follows. Anyone who touches an object that the man with discharge reclines upon such an object, even without touching it, for example, reclining upon any number of ritually undefiled blankets that are spread over a bed upon which the man with discharge reclined, becomes ritually defiled. In addition, any garments that this person is touching or otherwise wearing while this ritual impurity is being transmitted to him will also becomes ritually defiled. He must therefore immerse his garments and immerse himself in the water of mikveh, after which he will remain ritually defiled until the evening, at which time he and his garments will become rid of this defilement. Okay, so those are the verses. I mean, there's a little bit more, but we'll get to that afterwards on 113, but let's go to the Hasidic insights. Back to 111. Below the line, verse 2, discharges originating in the reproductive organs. So Hasidic insights writes this way: these types of ritual impurity serve to remind us how much our lives are a product of the events that occurred at the dawn of human history. I mentioned before that this all traces back. When we look at the story of humanity, God created a man and woman, and this was a gift, and gave them the Garden of Eden, and their actions shifted how the world is perceived. The world is the world, and God created the world, and the world is a godly, holy world at its core. But we humans have the ability to shift how it's to approach it in our own way, and therefore even to shift our approach to it. So while Adam and Eve originally were able to look at a tree and a frog and a rock and each other and see the beauty of why they exist and God's intent in their existence, once they detached the world from its divine purpose and starting with the fruit and saying, wow, this is luscious to the eyes, what does this do for me? The world in its sanctity, the world in its pure form, so to speak, receded. It's here, but it's not a surface level anymore. And surface level became a shallow, what's in it for me world. So our lives are a product of the events that occurred at the dawn of human history. The incident of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, and how we must continually strive to reverse the results of these events until reality is consummately spiritually healed with final messianic redemption. So with Mashiach, we reverse the effects of the sin in the Garden of Eden, and we go back to our original level of perception of oneness in the world and godliness in the world. Now, next paragraph. We have seen, way back in the beginning of Genesis, how Adam and Eve's eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge resulted in the descent of reality into a comprehensive materiality that obscures the divine energy and continuously creating it. Okay, which is what I was trying to say before. This idea to seeing the godliness is something they're talking about, not only the godly purpose, but the divine molecular flow. See how God creates everything. This hiding of divinity makes us acutely aware of our own existence, causing us to feel separate from God and even so unaware of his existence that it is possible to deny it. In a certain one where there was a book written a few years ago called Flow, I think. There are certain times in life when we're so wrapped up in the beauty of an experience that we don't really feel ourselves. We're part of something larger. People tell me that when they ride a horse, there's a beauty to it, where there's an intense focus and sense of purpose, and we're invested in something, and we're really not thinking about ourselves. So somewhere, some of that approximates when we're in a world, and that we're so overwhelmed by the fact that this is God's world, and there's a beauty to it, and there's a divine symphony going on, and we have the privilege of being part of it, and we see how everything in the world is its own instrument for that, to be part of that divine unity, that divine symphony. That's, it's not so much about us. We're part of the symphony. When that's hidden from us, and we look detached from each other, and like we're all decontextualized, marbles, then we're unaware of God's existence, and we can even deny it. We feel totally detached. Our intensely subjective perspective also encourages us to objectify all other human beings. One's subjective, one's objective. It doesn't mean objective, it's objectify. When it's all about me and not about our purpose, then I see in other people, what do they do for me? We see in other people, how do they serve my purposes? Not that this is my fellow traveler, my partner, my teammate. It's looking to see these are there's objectification because we don't see the beauty in other human beings. We don't see the connectedness of not only human beings, other things in life, as well as other creatures in general. 112. Were we to be aware, as we were before the primordial sin, of the divine reality that constantly creates all creation, we would be hardly conscious of ourselves as independent beings, and certainly not consider our own existence and interests worthy of any more of our attention than those of any other creature. In the Garden of Eden, it wasn't about the individuals, it was about the experience. But now it's about, we feel that we're each the entire world. Our acquired subjectivity, which is ultimately the existential venom of the primordial snake, because that's what the snake put into us. The snake represents evil. What's the evil? The evil is the self-centeredness. Locks us into an objectifying perspective on reality that we must do our best to overcome. Okay, so objectification is part of life. Objectification of people, of things, that's an instinctive way to go, because we instinctively feel ourselves as self. So we instinctively feel ourselves as kind of central, as we're number one. And unless we work with ourselves and we start to feel and make space for another one through love and caring and open heart and humility and dropping our walls, but that takes work. Instinctively, we feel ourselves, and we'll see others. It's like 2-year-olds, they are earlier. There's the idea, it's there's them, the world is them, and then there's the people around them, but it's not to be able to develop and be able to see that there's someone else who has feelings no less real and valid than them. That's part of maturing. And obviously take it to a greater extent as we become adults. And indeed, the Torah assures us that we can overcome it to a great extent. This is the ultimate purpose of the study of the Torah and the observance of all its commandments. That's what Torah wants us to do, to be able, what did Hillel say? What you don't like done to you, don't do to someone else. Sounds simple enough, but it's not so simple enough, because the idea is that you want to make sure that you see in another, even a stranger, that they have loves and fears and feelings and I don't know what just happened. Roberta, I think someone fell off. Ron is there. Okay. Something must have just gone wrong with my, okay. I hope you're all on. This is the ultimate purpose of the Torah mitzvahs, freeing us from the shackles of self-awareness and enabling us to feel genuinely altruistic love for our fellow creatures. So we're able to connect with each other. Nonetheless, none of us can extricate ourselves from our fallen perspective completely. The fact is, we're still always going to be human. And humanity has within it a hardwired challenge of the self. And to totally free ourselves of that, this will occur only when God causes, to quote verse, causes the spirit of impurity to pass away from the earth. The sages therefore inform us that even the select few who attain the greatest spiritual refinement possible in the present order of creation still have to die for no other reason than the bite of the primordial snake. Talmud talks about 4 people who the only thing that they carry, the only spiritual negativity they carried is that they're human. And they died because we all have to go through that process of purification. And because being human has something that comes with it. Everyone.
Is that comparable to the you think that's how the Christians got the concept of original sin?
I was thinking that as it was coming out of my mouth. I don't know where they got it from. I would say that I think we can be comfortable that our definition is not their definition, but and I'm not even sure that they got it from here. But yes, there's going to be this similarity, which we don't call a sin, and we don't think that it's anything we've done wrong, but there is a certain crudeness to the physical condition which will only be cured by Mashiach. At the same time, a person can be a righteous tzaddik or tzaddik. We can be righteous people even within the human condition. We've had many righteous people and holy people and people who are who have transformed the human condition as much as possible into one of meaning and holiness. But there's a limit to it. There's that final vestige. I think calling it original sin is probably harsher than I would, but as I was reading it, I was thinking, that's we may end up going down the conversation.
So do we start off as a clean slate or not?
The soul starts off as a clean slate. The human personality starts off as a human personality. Every morning we say a prayer to God, and we say the first thing we say in the morning after we wash our hands, after we go and we've used the facilities, and so we have to thank God for our body working. When we get into prayer, the first one is we say, God, the soul which you have given me is pure. So who's the me? I'm talking about my soul. So who's the I? I say, it doesn't say, God, I am pure. My soul, you created me pure. You created my soul pure. Say the soul which you have given within me. And the idea is that there is the divine soul which we have and which is given, which is pure, and at its core is always pure. So this whole original sin thing doesn't apply, I'm glad you brought that up. But within me, you've given me, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not feeling necessarily so godly. I mean, I'm not feeling like the devil either. It's me, my day, how I feel. I want my coffee, whatever it is. When we wake up in the morning, there's going to be that more self-centered default position the human being has until we think and we pray and we meditate and we can get into an other-centeredness. So the way it's structured is that's an assumption. The me that we all experience right when we wake up is going to be post-Garden of Eden me, where there's a me. And then we recognize that within me, God, you have given me a pure soul, which is free of this self-centeredness, free of this subjective, the subjective feeling, free of this objectification. And then if we want to be able to break through into our normal human persona with a more godly persona. So,
All right, thank you.
So the second paragraph on the left side of 112. Objectifying another human being can thus be seen as the ultimate and archetypal sin, the epitome of the evil that opposes the world's progress toward redemption. In that sense, therefore, seeing another human being as a tool of one's own pleasure in life, that really personifies. And again, not to make this all about Christianity, but that they see, that's why my understanding is that in Christian theology, they see the very idea of the marital intimacy as itself being, that was, part of the original sin. The idea of the objective pleasure. We don't see it that way, but the idea is the objectification comes from that. In this context, we can understand the critical importance that the Torah attaches to how we harness our carnal desires. There's no human activity that can produce pleasure comparable to that produced by carnal intimacy and release. It is therefore paramount to experience pleasure as far as possible, only in the course of making another person the subject of the experience by striving to grant them pleasure, rather than objectifying them, by using them as a means to derive pleasure for ourselves. This is a central thing that we know, that obviously it's out there in society. It's and it's the idea of why things sell is has nothing to do with anything but our own selfish pleasures. And because this idea of that element of carnal or the marital intimacy, because it's so powerful, and it is so powerful, then we say this is something that we want to be very careful about, not using that, going with that lane of thinking and objectifying others. Therefore, the Torah insists that the only permitted form of seminal emission is that in which a husband inseminates his wife. Again, not necessarily for having children. It could be she could be pregnant, it could be past menopause. That's the point. So inseminate doesn't mean it literally that way. It's the giving from one to another. And even then, he's required to focus on her pleasure rather than on his own. It should not be a mutually self-gratifying idea, exercise, but another gratifying. Any other type of seminal emission serves to objectify womankind in the man's perspective, and is therefore antithetical to the essence of redemption, contributes to the prolongation of the exile. So therefore, because we are talking about here about seminal emissions, it's a very central thing. That's why the idea, it's seen in, even though it's not technically a violation that you find in the Torah clearly, but in Jewish spiritual writings, very, very strong language against men going through this process of self-gratification and seminal emission on their own, because then it's all about the pleasure. And they're taking this beautiful, powerful part of life and making it all about themselves. So the Zohar, the Kabbalah, and the Talmud also, it's very, very strongly pushing against that practice. A man is therefore rendered ritually defiled by any emission from his procreative organ that results from carnal desire. So therefore, and I said, even if it's done in a good way, because it's always a vestige of the personal, even if there was a marital intimacy and focus on the other and joining with each other and feeling the connectedness. The fact is that there is some self-interest, and therefore that we say is ritually defiled by any omission from his procreative organ that results from carnal desire. Now, there are two types of such omissions: seminal and non-seminal. Seminal omissions are the results of a natural carnal drive. They render men ritually defiled to a limited extent, as we will see. So, as I said, go to the mikveh. I mean, there's what would happen if a person wanted to hear in the Torah about partaking in sacred foods, or later on the Talmud there wasn't sacred foods, but so it wasn't technically a biblical thing, but just in general to try and rinse ourselves of that. Even permitted seminal emissions render a husband ritually defiled, since, as just stated, it is impossible not to experience at least some pleasure in marital relations. Again, we're not against pleasure, but it is a self gratification, and we want to make sure that it doesn't pollute our thinking, our approach. Indeed, it is necessary for the husband to enjoy marital relations in order to please his wife, so that she can see that he desires her company. So there's nothing wrong with enjoying that, but want to look and say that there's something that we want to be careful about. I guess somewhat analogous to this is we've spoken about it when we finish a meal, and we're going to say Birkat HaMazon. We're going to thank God for a meal, and which is a good thing. Having a meal is a good thing. Thank God for a meal. And yet, one of the things was the rabbi still told us something of washing our fingertips before we do the Birkat HaMazon. It's called Mayim Acharonim, the waters after that we rinse after the food. Why? Because when we're satiated and we're full, we had a good meal. That's great, except that that's a point in life when it's less, where we're less positioned to appreciate that someone else is hungry. The self-satisfaction, the inner, the complacency, maybe even smugness that comes with having had a good meal, closes off some of our sensitivity receptors to someone else. When you're hungry, you can appreciate someone else's hunger. When you're not hungry, you can appreciate it, but it takes some work. So we rinse our fingers. It says that's to get rid of we're not regretting eating a meal. That's fine. But we want to be able to get rid of any of this, the complacency, the smugness, the self-satisfaction that can end up being a bit of a psychospiritual challenge and plug up the pores of our sensitivity in our hearts. This is somewhat similar. There's nothing at all. There's a good thing about having the marital intimacy, but the fact is, there is that sense, that self. Thus, paradoxically, even though the Torah all but insists that a husband experiences pleasure, he becomes ritually defiled thereby. Why? For even the smallest iota of self-awareness separates us from God, even if subtly. So it's a very delicate balance. Non-seminal emissions, in contrast, this Torah portion is really talking about non-seminal emissions. So what we'll call the Zav. So that they're the result of an abnormally inflated carnal appetite, resulting in turn from overindulgence in lascivious behavior, speech, or thought. It was this more consistent, not in the context of marital intimacy, and not even the context necessarily of trying to get it. There was this maybe somewhat like a gonorrhea type of thing. There was the emissions were coming out. But why did that happen? It was a physical manifestation of a spiritual problem, which is the overindulgence in carnal appetite. In the words of the sages, man possesses a small organ. The more he starves it, the more it is satisfied. The more he satisfies it, the more it hungers. So it is. We create more and more of a self-indulgence drive. in ourselves. Nevertheless, a single isolated instance of non-seminal emission. So let's get into the laws and a little bit of it and the meaning we can find. If it happened once, Tuesday, single isolated instance of non-seminal emission only renders a man spiritually impure to the same degree as does a seminal emission. Since, as an isolated incident, it reflects no more than the fallen state of consciousness that we all inherit from the primordial snake. So, if on a Tuesday morning there is this, not in the context of marital intimacy or anything like that, but there is this non-seminal emission, the person has to go to the mikveh. And then tomorrow morning, everything's fine. It's similar to the times of the temple after marital intimacy. However, when a man experiences two non-seminal emissions in succession, separated by less than a full intervening day, so it happened Tuesday at 10:23, and then Wednesday at 9 o'clock. It's not only once, now it's twice. It's more of a problem. It indicates that he has purposely corrupted himself beyond natural, meaning post-tree knowledge, human objectification. So we're saying now this is not just the norm, the norm of the fact that we all are afflicted with this, with self-interest. In such a case, his ritual defilement is more serious. Therefore, a full week is required for him to be purged of it. That's what we read. When a man experiences three non-seminal emissions in succession, so it was Tuesday at 10:23, Wednesday at 10, and Thursday at 9:30. So this has become a pattern. It indicates he has become so entrenched in this corrupt perspective, and this is all the scripture. It indicates he has become so entrenched in this corrupt perspective in life that it has become the normal. It has become his norm, because doing something three times establishes a status quo in Jewish life. It's called chazaka. So now this is his norm. Is this sex indulgent perspective becomes normative consciousness, and therefore his ritual impurity is so severe that it requires, in addition to a full week of purgation, a full sacrificial rite. Nonetheless, so that's what the Torah, all these verses. It's presenting us to us three scenarios. Person has a non-seminal emission once, twice, three times again within a day of each other. Nonetheless, together with its warning against reinforcing anti-divine consciousness through transgressing God's will, 113 on the right side, the Torah informs us that the power of repentance is such that even someone who has internalized evil to the extent that it has displaced his natural consciousness altogether can still be rehabilitated. Yet, so the upside of all this is the Torah saying this can happen and this can go on, and yet there is redemption. So, no questions. Let's do some more on 113. Similarly, verse 6. Anyone who touches or even sits on an object upon which the man with the discharge sat without touching it, it becomes ritually defiled. In addition, any garments that this person is touching or otherwise wearing while this ritual impurity is being transmitted to him also become ritually defiled. Whatever he's wearing, he must there immerse his garments and immerse himself in the water of a mikveh. His garments go in the mikveh, he goes in the mikveh. After which he will remain ritually defiled until evening, at which time he and his garments become rid of this defilement. In contrast, if the man with a discharge merely touches an object, even an object is made for a crime of sitting, the touched object transmits defilement only to food or drink, not to people or influence. Okay, so these are nuances in the laws of what we call tumah, the impurity. Based on this, it goes without saying that anyone who directly touches the flesh of the man with the discharge becomes ritually defiled. And in addition, any garments he is touching, or otherwise wearing while this ritual impurity is being transmitted to him, will also become ritually defiled. He must therefore immerse his garments and immerse himself in the water of the mikveh, after which he will remain defiled until evening, at which time he will become rid of this defilement. Number 8, if the man with a discharge spits on an undefiled person, and the saliva either touches the person himself or he carries it, not touching it directly, such a person becomes ritually defiled, as do any garments he is touching or otherwise wearing while this ritual impurity is being transmitted to him. He must therefore immerse his garments and immerse himself in the water of the mikveh, after which he will remain defiled until evening, at which time he will become rid of this defilement. With regard to any part of a saddle, other than the seat, meaning the pommel or the cantle, if the man with the discharge rides, meaning leans, again, we said before about putting weight on, upon it, he becomes defiled thereby. Whoever touches any such part of the saddle that was under the man with the discharge, meaning they leaned upon it but didn't sit upon it, becomes ritually defiled, but his garments do not become defiled. Thus, he is only required to immerse himself in a mikveh and wait until evening in order to become rid of this defilement. He does not have to immerse his garments. The law regarding the saliva of the man with the discharge also applies to the discharge itself. The man's vital seed, his urine, the objects in which he was reclined, sat, or ridden. Whoever carries them becomes ritually defiled, as to any garments this person is touching or otherwise wearing, while this ritual impurity is being transmitted to him. He must therefore immerse his garments, immerse himself in the water of mikveh, after which he will remain defiled until evening, at which time he will become rid of this defilement. Something. Let's do 114 on also, and just go to the next. Let's here the final reading. 11. Whomever the man with a discharge touches before the latter immerses himself in the mikveh becomes defiled, even if the man with a discharge has already counted 7 consecutive days since this discharge ceased. In order for immersion to be valid, it is only necessary that the parts of the body exposed when the person immersing stands upright and naked, like his hands, be covered with water, but not interior skin, such as that of the inside of the nose or the mouth. In addition, any garments that the touched person can keep their mouth closed in the mikveh. In addition, any garments that the touched person is touching or otherwise wearing while this ritual impurity is being transmitted to him also become ritually defiled. The one who was touched under these circumstances must therefore immerse both his garments and immerse himself in the water of the mikveh, after which he will remain defiled until evening, which time he will become rid of this defilement. As was mentioned previously, earthenware vessels only become ritually defiled when the fourth source of defilement is present inside of them, not through contact with their outer surface. This principle is true of the ritual defilement transmitted by a man with discharge as well, with the following exception. An earthenware vessel that the man with discharge moves either directly or by touching it, or indirectly, becomes ritually defiled. If he merely touches it from the outside without moving it, however, it does not become defiled. Likewise, any other defiled earthenware vessel must be shattered in order to be rid of this defilement. In contrast, any other, meaning wooden vessel that he touches, becomes defiled only when he touches it, not when he moves it indirectly. But it becomes defiled even when he touches it from the outside. It must be covered by water, immersed in the mikveh, and become rid of its ritual defilement. When the man with the discharge is rid of his discharge, the discharge has clearly ceased. He must count for himself 7 consecutive days during which he remains free of the discharge. He must then immerse his garments and immerse his flesh in spring water or other flowing natural water. That's anytime in mikveh, it has to be naturally flowing water, such as a flowing river. A mikveh of not naturally flowing water, such as a man-made pool, a lake, a pond, or the ocean, is not valid for the immersion of a man with this type of discharge. Nor is it for a woman. Our mikveh here is not naturally flowing water, but there's rainwater. Always, without the rainwater in the pool, it's not valid. After proper immersion, it will become undefiled, and he will no longer defile. That he will no longer defile anyone or anything else, and may consume truma if he's entitled to it. If he had only 2 discharges before his flow ceased, he may after immersion consume sacrificial meat and enter the tabernacle precincts. So they said about this was about 3, not about 2. If he had that 2 is okay. If ever he had 3 or more discharges before his flow ceased, he may neither consume sacrificial meat nor enter the tabernacle precincts after immersing himself until he performs the following rites. On the 8th day, he must take for himself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, come before God to the entrance of the meeting, and give them to the priest. So with 3, they have to bring an offering. The priest must then sacrifice them, one as a sin offering, the other as an ascent offering, and thus the priest will effect atonement from his discharge before God. He may then consume sacrificial meat and enter the tabernacle precincts. So we will continue and maybe even finish this Torah portion next time we meet. That'll be 2 times. Have a great week.
Thank you.